I couldn't. I love the night. That's the only time I feel really alive.
That's what David wanted.
Blood, I was to find, was a necessity as well.
A vampire in love with a slayer. It's rather poetic. I am the monster the breathing men would kill. I am Dracula.
Good evening, my fellow vampire lovers. The sun is going down, and you know what that means. It's time for me to record another episode of my podcast, The Beautiful Dead. As always, I'm your host, Lena Nazari. You can find me at lenanazari.com or The Beautiful Dead Podcast on Instagram. Guess what? It's September. You know what that means. September means, for me, the start of spooky season. Now, some people may tell you it's October and October only. I don't care. It's my podcast, and I've decided that we're starting spooky season. Plus, September is my birthday, and I just love to celebrate. So we're going to be using September to do what I want to do. So some of these are vampire related, some of these are vampire adjacent, but you're just going to go on this September ride with me, and that is going to lead us into October, which I am so excited about. And if you don't know what we're talking about in October, you need to go follow me on social media, because that's how you're going to find out. Or go to lenanazari.com and join my Fanged family and get emails from me as I start to put things together for October. And the end of September, I will be in New Orleans. So make sure you're following me on social media to see videos and lives and pictures of everything I'm going to be doing down there. I am so excited. And I'm sorry about my squeaky chair. I've just realized it's squeaky, but it's kind of too late to fix it now. So, all right. I don't want to miss my Vampyre Tea, because recently I feel like I've been forgetting, and I apologize. So tonight we're doing GuilTea Pleasures, which is a black tea with blackberry. I have it in my skeleton yoga mug here. I think you can actually still see the steam coming off of it because I just made it. I also, because I'll be doing so much talking, have water in my Baphomet cup here. So you guys see I redecorated for the spooky season episodes. The Halloween tree is up, and it will stay with me until January. I rearranged. I don't know if you could see everything. We have a nice bleeding candelabra behind us now. I'm very, very excited. Let me know what you think about the new setup. It is the first of the month, so even though I'm really excited to talk about what we're going to talk about tonight, we do need to talk about my tarot card for the month. Very exciting. So remember, August was all about a mentor coming into my existence. It was going to help guide me, help grow me. And now this is September, and September is the Knight of Pentacles. The Knight of Pentacles is actually a positive omen for my love life. And if you're curious to know who my tarot reader is, I'm going to show her on the YouTube channel right now, but she'll also, the link will be in my video description, but that is Artemis Moon on Etsy, so go check her out. Yeah, so the Knight of Pentacles is supposed to represent something like a fairy tale romance. Someone is going to sweep me off my feet. It says if you've always imagined meeting someone in a specific scenario, like a cafe or a party or a train, this might actually signify that that is going to come true. It usually indicates that my new love interest will be younger than me, maybe just a couple years, or maybe just a couple months, maybe a year. It won't be a big gap, but it is going to be someone younger than me. Represents someone that I've been waiting for to come into my life, a person who possesses the traits that I'm looking for in a partner: ambitious, dependable, faithful, someone who's ready to commit. It says someone with a very big heart who's likely a family person. They're always on time. They always say what they're asked to do, or they always do what they say they're going to do. Very reliable. Think before they act. If they commit to something, it's because they've put a lot of thought into it, not a game player, truly ready for a commitment. So we'll see. I don't know. You will be the first to know if this happens. Very, very exciting stuff. So I will keep you all updated. And actually, that's a good card to lead us into tonight's topic. It's been a while since I've done a book on this podcast. As you guys know, that I shy away from reading vampire novels. The classics don't count, but I shy away from reading new vampire novels because I am afraid it will affect my own writing. But if anybody saw my interview with Jack Townson and Shane Townson, he talked a bunch about his book, and I was just like, okay, I'll read it. I was so intrigued by what he was saying, and I am a vampire of my word. So I bought it and I read it. It took me a few hours one night and a few hours the next morning, but I binged it very quickly. It was a very easy read, and I was so into it I couldn't put it down, and I knew with how busy I was going to be in September and October that if I was going to read this, it had to be quick, and I was able to do it. So let's talk about Fame Has Its Price, the Vampire Jack Townson. Very exciting. Very exciting. Okay, so I am going to read just the summary that's kind of on the back of the book. It says, a man down on his luck trips and stumbles into a world of bloodthirsty monsters hidden among the precipices of New York City. A chance encounter with the illustrious vampire Alexander Lamont ensnares the clumsy yet hopeful James Donovan in shadow and treachery, thrusting James into his new identity, the Vampire Jack Townson. Will Jack survive the vampiric politics of Manhattan, or will final death come to claim him at the next sunrise? We are going to jump right in. Vampiric references. I didn't think there were going to be any. It's a modern vampire novel. I just, right when I was thinking there's going to be nothing to report, on page 350, Jack states that he feels much like Renfield's servitude to Dracula. We have a vampire reference. I loved it. My boy Vlad made an appearance, and I love it. It was quick, yet honorable and respectful, and I will allow it. And I'm going to add a category for this universe breakdown, and that is other supernaturals in the universe. Something I myself absolutely love. And in this world, there are other supernaturals. There's witches, there's ghosts, ghouls, were-animals, alchemists, and many, many others. I think I'm going to meet more in the subsequent books. They're just sort of touched upon very quickly. As we all know, in the first book, there's a lot of exposition, there's a lot of character backstory and introducing things and ideas and elements and people. And so sometimes it's hard to get to the really juicy stuff, but we did get a bunch of little different introductions to different creatures, so I'm really excited for that. Relationship to humans. Jack on his first night mentions that he's seen Hollywood movies and has questions about what's real and what's not real. So we know in this universe that vampire movies and TV shows and books exist. So we know that the idea of vampires exists. However, humans don't know that vampires are real for the most part, and the vampires sort of move amongst them. They have businesses and they're involved in different parts of human life, but not necessarily do the humans know that vampires exist. And then of course vampires feed on humans. And then there are ghouls who are blooded humans who are bound to a vampire. The ghoul in this story is named Chester. He calls himself Vampire Light, which I thought was a fabulous way to describe it. The deal is that you do eventually have to turn your ghoul. So think of Guillermo and Nandor if Nandor actually stuck to his promise and Guillermo wasn't a descendant of Van Helsing. Oh, I forgot to say, spoiler alerts. I'm gonna spoil so much. Oh boy. If you've never seen this show, I spoil everything, and I just spoiled stuff for you, so sorry. I owe you a Coke. All right. Relationship to animals. This is never really addressed. I mean, we get to see the usual rats that you would see in New York City. They're like sort of a set piece whenever you have anything set in New York City, but we don't see them react differently to the vampires. So it's not like Jack is turned and suddenly controls rats, or they're suddenly drawn to him, or suddenly dogs freak out when he's around or anything. I just want to say too, remember I only read this one time, so I may have missed stuff. So if Jack or big fans of Jack listen to this and I have messed something up, it is okay to tell me, please. I will rectify. Appearance. To humans, they appear human, as they can use glamour to cover their sort of inhuman aspects. In full form, they have visible vasculature on pale skin, inhuman eye colors such as lavender or red or orange, long, sharpened nails that are more similar to claws than fingernails. After Jack is turned, he mentions that his bones have shifted to give him more of a sculpted look, and his lips are fuller. I want you to put a pin in that, and I want you to hold on to that for later. Other vampires from other lines look different. So we find this, and I'm going to touch on this later, and you see I'm smiling. We're going to touch on this later. We find out that vampires are adaptable and they will change based on the environment they're in. So we come across vampires who live in sewers and they look more serpentine. They have scales and glowing eyes. Obviously they have to adapt to seeing in the dark. And it's a more moist environment. So they do adapt based on the environment they're living in. Fangs, 2 elongated, sharpened canines that are always present. But I think it's implied that the length can change based on necessity. So maybe at rest they're smaller, and then if you're in like a fight situation, they grow. I believe that was implied in the book. If I am wrong, please don't hesitate to tell me. But I think that was the implication. Blood. They do need to drink blood. Jack awakens with a thirst after being turned. This is not something new. We've seen this one before. Vampire blood can heal, and the blood of your maker is the most effective. So that is a little twist on the lore. You cannot drink from the dead. We've seen that one before. And at one point, Jack starts getting blood bags, and we find out that Alexander is a blood trader. So not trader as in like you stab me in the back trader. Trader as in like I trade goods for goods. He's a trader, and he sells bags to a lot of the vampires in the city. And this is not necessarily done in like a kosher way. So, you know, Soren in my books, he has blood bags because he buys them. But this is, it's explained to us later that he's human trafficking. So not like the best way to do it. We've seen the idea of like human blood farms. It's that kind of way. He snatches humans and then he uses them for God knows how long before they wear out. And then he fills bags with these humans and he... We will talk about Alexander later. Let me tell you what a prince he is. It was tough because Alex in my book, I love my Alex. So when you first see the name Alexander, you're like, I sure do like an Alexander. Not this piece of shit. He's horrible. They could not be any more different. My Alex and Jack's Alex could not be any more different. Yeah, we'll get to that. Food. There is a couple instances where we hear that the vampires are drinking liquor, and we've seen that before. The Vampire Diaries, they use liquor to sort of try and sate the thirst and sort of like pull back on the hunger a little bit. I don't know if that's why these vampires drink liquor, but they do drink. We never see them eat. And they never drink wine. No, I think they actually do drink wine, so I can't use that one. Dang it, I love that joke. Sunlight. They cannot be in the sun. Full stop. No playing around. Jack, you know, I appreciate that. I like my vampires to be nocturnal. Sleep. So as long as they're out of the sun, they can sleep anywhere, like most vampires. These vampires do dream, however. So many books and movies do not ever address if vampires can dream or not. I did it in my books. Jack has done it in his books. It's always something I'm kind of on the lookout for because it would depend. Do they die when they sleep, like the ones in True Blood, or do they actually sleep just the same way humans do, in which case they would dream? So I thought that was interesting. And then we found out later that Alex is actually connected. I'm not going to call him Alex because I love my Alex. Alexander, Mr. Alexander, I'm going to use his full name because he's in trouble, is connected to Jack when he dreams and can see what he's dreaming, which is awful. Could you imagine if someone could see everything you were dreaming? Oh my goodness. And like to get pissed at you about something that you're dreaming, which you can't control what you're dreaming. We've all been there, am I right? Where your partner's pissed at you for something you did in their dream. I don't know if it's a normal sire progeny thing or it's just one of Alexander's powers. I'm not sure, but that sucks for Jack. Holy items. This is never addressed. However, they don't feel like the vampires that would be repelled by crosses or anything to me. I feel pretty confident saying holy items are not a thing. Let's talk about the rules, because you guys know how I am about rules, and a lot of the other vampire creators I've spoken to try to be pretty specific with their rules. They do cast a reflection and they don't need invited in. So those are two right out of the way. So this is where I kind of want to talk about the lines. So in this world, you are born to a vampire line, and they are referred to as your house or your guild, but it's your bloodline, okay? So Jack is sired by Alexander, who is the head of House Epine, I think. I hope I'm saying that right. Epine. Anywho, each house has its own rules, okay? In this house, there's only supposed to be one progeny at a time, and that is a rule that was actually broken when Jack was made. And the reason that Alexander has this sort of rule is because as the bloodline continues, the head of the bloodline loses power. So the power is spread across the house. So if you have a house of 20 vampires, each vampire is going to be less powerful than a house that has 3 vampires, if that makes sense. Are you following me so far? Oh, I hope I got this all right. I'm pretty sure I got this right. So as the line continues, then there's less power, and obviously less power spread across as well. In this world, there are vampiric authorities. So there's a king of New York, and he has a rule that any progeny should be approved by him before they are sired. And he has the power to destroy vampires in his territory. We've seen this in other things. I have something similar in my books. And this rule is obviously broken when Jack is made, because Alexander makes Jack and did not say anything to the king about it, and then just sends Jack to the king in the hopes that the king's gonna be cool with it. Like, lets Jack take all of that responsibility on. And Jack doesn't know any of this. He's just thrown into this war. Oh my God, we'll talk about Alexander. It also appears that electricity has a greater impact on these vampires than the humans of the world. So it's almost like their body has a greater conductivity than the human body. So that's interesting. I'm not sure if that's going to play a part at some point, but I did love the idea of like this small biological change to the body, as that's just as simple as I conduct electricity at a greater speed and power than the human body. All right, let's get into powers. So every vampire has their own dark gifts. So the elders, like Alexander, are very powerful, and we've talked about this. The head of the line's very powerful. All of the vampires are extremely strong and agile. They have heightened senses like sight, hearing, and touch. They have a glamour that makes them appear to humans as human, and it seems like it's just kind of always in place, and you have to make an effort to drop that glamour if you choose to. You can also glamour businesses. You can mask a business so that people don't see it, or they see it as something else. They can control minds and wipe memories. There's a great scene where Jack is doing it for the first time, and he's trying to get a hang of it. He's in like a drugstore, and he tells the store employee, "You're gonna let me take this," and the employee is like, "No, you're gonna pay for it, or I'm gonna call the cops." I actually laughed out loud because I was like, "That's it." There was a beat, and then you expect the employee to be like, "Okay," the employee's like, "No, you're gonna pay for it, or I'm gonna throw your ass out." And the power is like a reserve in the bloodline, as I said. The smaller the bloodline, the more reserve in the tap. This is partly why Alex is so strong, and they make a point to mention time, like as people find out who Jack's sire is, they're like, oh my God, Alexander Lamont, no, I don't want anything to do with that because he is so powerful and kind of a dick. All right, how are they made? So this is a classic embrace. We know how Lena feels about this. I love a classic embrace. You are bitten, you are fed on, then you ingest your sire's blood, you die that night, and the turning seems to take almost like the entire following day, and then you arise the next night as a vampire. And in this world, the maker is called sire, and the made are called progeny. In this universe, the King of New York has a rule that a human who wants to be turned is supposed to present themselves to the king, and then the king will either say yes and will place him with the correct house, or will say no and wipe the memory of the human so they don't even remember that it happened. So the king is kind of like the sorting hat, you know. He meets, so let's say I go before the king and I say, I really want to be a vampire. And the king says, okay, you can be a vampire. I'm going to place you with this house because you're best suited for them because they are all healers or whatever. And he gets to choose like the sorting hat. I love that. How do they die? These vampires are very hard to kill. Alex's skin is damn near bulletproof. Puncturing the heart with a wooden item will paralyze the vampire until it's removed. Dead man's blood is like a poison, kind of like in Supernatural. To kill them, you have to destroy the head, like chop it off or blow it apart with a shotgun, expose them to the sun. I think one guy is killed when someone reaches into his chest and rips his heart out, but it was like a very, very action-packed scene. A lot was happening. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that that happened. And when the vampire dies in this universe, they turn to dust. So don't stop until the vampire is dust. Because the last thing you need is the vampire faking their death and then popping up and getting you. So in this world, if you're trying to kill a vampire, do not stop until they turn to dust. The more you know. Okay. Heartbeat or breathing. So they still mimic the action of breathing in and out, but it's explained to us that the oxygen's not actually utilized by the lung. It's more of just an instinct than an actual need. And the heart stops not when the turn is complete, but after your first kill. So you've been turned into a vampire, you're enjoying the vampire night, you make your first kill, that's when your heart stops. I love it. Everything was so explained for me and I loved it. All right, are they good or are they bad? So like so many vampires that we discuss on this channel, the vampires can choose if they are going to use their eternity to be good or to be bad. They get to choose what they're going to do with it. We see good vampires, we see bad vampires. Being turned does not automatically make you good or bad. Even the guild that you're brought into doesn't make you one or the other. Side note to the vampires, a little goodness lesson. Please teach your progeny everything they need and how to look out for themselves. Don't turn them and kick them out of the nest. Like, it's just a super shitty thing to do. So please don't do that to your progeny. And there, I've just taught you just a little tiny lesson of how to be a good vampire. It's not that hard, but I'm going to say that out loud. Tropes I love and tropes I hate. Can we give Jack a shout out here for not just having two sharp fangs, no sunlight, but for having the rules so beautifully explained. The structure of the universe was so beautifully explained, and then you stuck to it. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I just want to say, for people who have never watched this channel or listened to this podcast, when I talk about tropes I love and tropes I hate, that's not a criticism. I'm just saying personally, myself, Lena, there are some vampire tropes I really love and some vampire tropes that I don't like so much. And I've talked to Shane and Jack themselves about this, so. Tropes I love. I love a world with many different types of creatures, supernatural creatures. A world of just vampires is very boring. It's also kind of hard to believe that the only The only thing outside of human is vampire. So if you have vampires, I guarantee there's other things happening, right? In the supernatural, preternatural world. So I love when we get that. I also love when there are different lines of vampires and their traits or appearances are based on the line that they're in. It's very Vampire the Masquerade, Kindred the Embraced. I am here for it. And I'm actually really sad that I did not do that. And I am 4 books in. I've started the 5th book, so the world I have is the world I have, but dang it. And I said this to Jack after I was done reading, like, I really wish I had done that. I had done Bloodlines. I played Vampire the Masquerade for years. I was Toreador, and then I was obsessed with Kindred the Embraced when it came out, and why didn't I do that? Gosh darn it. Anywho. I also love when the vampires all have different powers. So we see this in Interview with the Vampire, and we see this again in Kindred the Embraced or the Vampire the Masquerade, where different vampires have different powers, and you're kind of waiting to see what vampire has what power. I did use that in my books. I love that. I don't want to live in a world where every vampire has the same abilities, because it takes the tension and the mystery out of any new character. I also think that power should grow with age. I don't like the worlds where the fledglings are stronger than the masters. Twilight, I'm looking at you. I don't like that. I think that the older the vampire, the stronger the power. That's how I like it to be. And we have the classic embrace. It was a very intense embrace. Yikes. It was really intense. It rides the fine line of sensuality and torture. I needed a minute to breathe after that scene. It was a moment, and we see this with Lestat sometimes, where like the mask falls a little. So it was that first time where I was like, oh, Jack, oh, I think you made a mistake. I think this is a bad decision. Up until that moment, you'd fallen for it just like Jack did. And then that was the first moment where that mask falls a little bit and you're like, uh-oh. Tropes I hate. So I'm going to be honest. I don't think there was anything in the book where I was like, ugh, I'm not a fan of that. Why did he choose that? Of course, I'm going to address one thing, because I have said this before. I said it to Jack himself. I don't like a brooding vampire. I don't like vampires that hate their own existence. But in this case, it actually works. Jack doesn't hate that he's a vampire. Jack hates the vampire existence he has been brought into. He hates the cruelty of his maker. And he's suddenly ripped away from his family. It makes a lot of sense if you've ever been tricked into an abusive relationship where you've gone through like the love bombing, and then all of a sudden you realize you're in a bad situation and you really wish that you weren't there, and it makes it hard to want to get out of bed. That is the brooding that's sort of happening. So I think it works in this situation. It also makes Jack a little more relatable. So I will allow it. All right, the ratings. Let's talk about the ratings. I was a little nervous to do the ratings because I did enjoy this book so much. And sometimes when you enjoy something a lot and it's the first time you've been exposed to it, that you don't want to pick things apart. But that's what I do on this podcast, and I had read the book, and I thought that it would be a shame if I didn't cover it on the podcast, especially because Jack worked so hard on it. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the ratings. How scary or evil are the vampires of the Vampire Jack Townson universe? Now, we are looking at the vampires as a whole. I will give specific examples from different characters, but we are looking at an average here because I can't do each person. It would take too long. Yummy tea. Now you see why I chose GuilTea Pleasures, because... Okay. Let's address evil first. So the way that Jack wrestles with the beast inside of him, it kind of feels a little bit like the vampires of Buffy, but these vampires don't lose their souls and then have like a vampire demon inside of them. It's more like the vampire spirit has joined inside the body with the human soul, if that makes sense. Like now it's split into two. And they have like, it's a dichotomy. They have two of them because he's talking to the beast. He's like talking to the thing inside of him that's made him a vampire. So this tells me you can choose to do good with your existence like Jack. Or be a self-centered monster like Alexander. The vampires are extremely hard to kill. They have a respectable amount of powers, some very good powers. They have cleaners to clean up their messes, and they're like involved in the police force, so they basically own the police. They don't need invited in. They aren't repelled by garlic or holy items. As far as I can tell, there's no hunters in this world that I know of, or that know of hunters. I mean, know of vampires and the vampire weaknesses. Their infrastructure is very solid, and there is a lot of them. But they are bound by the sun. They can be killed with the right advantage and equipment. Their consciousness is intact. They do have a conscience. So the good vampires do exist, and I think a major weakness is that there is so much infighting, there's so much backstabbing, there's so many vampire politics that they're not even like safe amongst their own kind. They're almost less safe amongst their own kind than they are with the humans. But still very solid vampires. I'm going to give them 7.75 out of 10 stakes to the heart for scariness and evil. If they could just get along and then decided to go after humans and just take over, I think they could. I think they could take over very quickly, actually. How sexy or alluring are the vampires of the Vampire Jack Townson universe? The vampires are very sexual. Jack clearly has some kind of special allure because two human ladies at a bar that he stands between go from being pissed that he just like got between the two of them to in love in about 2.5 seconds immediately. They were annoyed, and then they were like, oh, hey. And then I think that they would have fought each other to get to Jack. They're throwing themselves at him. So even he realizes I must have some kind of pull. Have to be objective though. Not all of the vampires are models. And this is something that I didn't touch on, but we find out that his shifting in appearance is not because of the vampire turn. Alexander actually molded his body to be more like what Alexander wanted, which is fucked. That's crazy. But not all vampires are models, right? We see some that have scales, we see some that are giants. So, and this is a teen average. Plus, some don't understand consent, and that is very unsexy to me. So I have to ask the usual question. Are these vampires more scary than sexy? And I think scariness wins here. Yes, they're sexual, but not all of them. Some of them are hot, but not all of them. Yes, they have a special allure to the humans. But if they draw you into the bedroom, are you gonna make it out alive? I don't know. I certainly wouldn't put money on it. So 5 out of 10 onks for sexiness and allure. That feels right. Feels pretty good. My thoughts. So like I said, I stopped reading modern vampire fiction when I was writing my first novel because I was so scared it would influence my writing. I was afraid I would get too into my own head and I would start comparing and I would be neurotic about it, so I just stopped. But I meant it when I said that I believe in Jack and Shane's vision and what they want to do, and I do believe that artists should support each other. I knew that it was a risk to throw this in as my first spooky season episode because I do have so much to do, and I had a lot of like coordinating to get done for September and October, and the only way to pull it off was to binge read, but I did it. I did it. I read it so fast. There are some fabulous lines in this book, some great lines. I underlined some stuff, highlighted some stuff. I'm gonna read it again when I'm not under the gun and trying to do it for a review. I just want to like enjoy it as the reader. There are so many different influences in this story that I feel, in my opinion, Jack and Alexander have a little Louis and Lestat in them, for sure. There was a little bit of What We Do in the Shadows in there, some Dracula, some Vampire the Masquerade, and that is not a criticism at all, because my books all draw from different things. It is all amazing pieces of work and all my favorite types of vampires and vampire tropes and vampire worlds. And so these little pieces came together, and then Jack threw all of his own stuff into it and then made this new, beautiful, solid vampire world. I think that it is very rich and very diverse. It's very easy to be pulled into it. I'm excited for the next one to come out. There were actually instances in the book where I realized that we addressed very similar thoughts and issues in our books. At one point he writes, "Oh, vampires don't blush." And in my book I wrote, "Oh great, vampires still can blush. Good to know." He says, "I almost shit my pants if I could even still do that." And in my book, Reese says, "If we could pee, I would have wet myself." So it's funny how we like addressed the same issues, the dreaming versus not dreaming. I feel like we have very, very similar ideas and tastes when it comes to what vampires, in my opinion, should be. Outside of vampires, this is a lot of fantasy. There's so much fantasy. I really hope that the next book is more of the fantastical stuff. It definitely needed to be as much exposition as it was, because it was world creation and character introductions, and it is gritty and it is dark, and it ended very quickly in this like magical world of were-lions and witches, and I got excited and then it was done. So I think he does such a very good job at quickly getting across to the reader what he sees in the book, what he feels, what is happening. When he describes the Undercity and the beings moving about, it almost felt like a Guillermo del Toro, like Pan's Labyrinth sort of thing. I immediately pictured Pan's Labyrinth, and that pulled me very quickly into that part of the universe. Alexander is a piece of shit. And I don't know if it's my own trust issues, and I said this to Jack, I don't know if it's my own trust issues, but I didn't like him from the jump. Boys, girls, and theys do not fall in love in one day, okay? It doesn't usually go well. I know there are the exceptions. I know that people know somebody who met on the plane, fell in love, got married in a week, and were together. Great. Good for you. That is the exception. If you're getting love bombed and someone says, "I'm going to make your dreams come true, but you have to choose right now or walk away forever," that is no. And no one should ever look at you and say, "You're mine." I read this without reading any of the triggers, so be warned. The assaults are rough, as they should be. I don't think that we should shy away from that type of abuse, cruelty, gaslighting. It's awful, it's very real, and if we don't talk about it, it helps these things to continue happening. The violence was realistic, the partner violence was realistic, and it's terrible. None of us are without traumas or scars, and it's what we learn from those experiences and how we grow from them that makes us who we are. But I do want to warn you, if you haven't read the book, and you have an issue with abuse triggers, then perhaps this is not the book for you. Maybe pick up the second one. I don't know. I'll read it and I'll let you know. But I just think that it was very important that he did not shy away from those things. I mean, any of us who love horror see a lot of violence in horror that is fantastical violence, unrealistic violence, but violence nonetheless. So when it comes to like partner violence and assault and abuse, it is very important that you don't lose the reality of those situations, because again, if you don't talk about it, then that's how that kind of stuff continues to happen. So that is my review of the book, Breaking Down the Universe. I'm so glad that I decided to pick it up and read it. I am very, very excited for the second one. I don't know when it's going to be out, but I will certainly mention it on the podcast when I find out. I think this was a great way to ring in September, and I also think it's a good, the next week we're gonna do AMC's Interview with the Vampire seasons 1 and 2. So I read this book and then I dove in. I had already seen season 1, I watched season 2, and like I said, there was a little Louis and Lestat in this, and so then I jumped into Interview with the Vampire. So definitely like a vampire-filled week I got to have, so very exciting. So join me next week as we talk about AMC's Interview with the Vampire, season 1 and 2, and then the following week we're going to take a step away from the vampires and do something that I wanted to talk about, which is the Satanic Panic. For anybody that's not familiar with the Satanic Panic, this episode is gonna blow your mind. I have done weeks of research. I'm coming with everything. I worked really, really hard on it. For those of you who do know the Satanic Panic, or like me, lived through it, trust me, you do not know a fraction of what was going down. I still cannot believe some of the stuff that I found out. So we're gonna do the Satanic Panic. The week after that, we're gonna keep that going, and we're gonna do witches. We're going to talk about witch trials, witches and vampires, how they often are sort of in the same pot. They get thrown in the same stories. They get put through the same situations, and sort of that way that witches are treated and the way that vampires have been treated, and how often that comes together. Sometimes they're foes, sometimes they're lovers, sometimes they're friends, but we're going to talk about witches. And then we're going to end September with a little vampire history lesson from a vampire professor. So he and I are gonna sit down and give you a vampire college level vampire history class to get you ready for October. So please, if you don't already follow me, if you're not already subscribed, please do that. Make sure that you see all those fun things coming. I'm telling you, I worked so hard on the Satanic Panic and the witch episode. Like, I'm very, very proud of the work that I've done, and I'm very excited for you guys to see that. So Jack, if you're watching, fantastic job. Cannot wait for the second one. I really think we should, all us vampire authors and creators should be supporting each other, and I'm so, so, so glad that I now get to be a part of this universe, and I can't wait to see your movie next year. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up. I wish you wicked hugs and bloody kisses. Good evening.